So to get started on our block, I've got my cutaway stabilizer, I've got wash away thread in my needle, and I'm going to stitch the embroiderer's felt onto the top using colorway 1. What this is going to do is secure that cutaway, and I'm now going to come through and trim away all of that excess embroiderer's felt. I'm using a pair of sharp scissors that can get right into that corner or to the edges of that design, so that we don't end up with any of the embroiderer's felt in our seams once our project is completed. So we'll trim that away, and we're nearly ready to get our fabric and lay on top and stitch out colorway 2 to hold that fabric down. Threaded up in my machine, I have wash away thread, and I use wash away thread simply because it allows me to not have any extra thread marks showing as I do my stitching. What I'm doing at the moment is coming through and stitching the first colorway, which is going to hold down the embroiderer's felt and the cotton. So Rock the Casbah is going to be a block of the month. We will, however, be doing multiple blocks each month. Just come back here. And now we're going to start laying down some applique pieces. Now I'll show you exactly what we're going to be doing here. So this is the quilt block that we are going to be creating. This was my first sample that I made of this design. So we are going to be appliquing these segments on before doing a decorative stitch. So I'm going to come down now. When I lay my applique fabric over, I actually want to leave an extra about 5mm on the edge here, simply because we know we are going to get some sucking in as we do the quilting on this project. So for joining up, we just want to make that design as pretty as possible. And once I've set that, I'm going to come through and I want to move the hoop forward to make it easy for me to cut. I like to cut each piece as I go along, and I love using my curved tip scissors for this, just because I feel they give me the best result. They cut really close. Take your time with cutting. You really want to do the best job possible, because it will give you the best look at the end. And remember, we're leaving that tag there. Then I can come along and stitch the second piece of pie outline. And you just want to make sure you're keeping those lines covered. Now you'll notice I haven't changed my thread. I'm still using my washable thread because that's going to save bulkiness at the end of our design. I'm just going to move that. Oh, look at that, it already moved for me. Perfect. So I just want to leave a little bit of extra space along here down the bottom. Somewhere between 5 and 10 millimeters is absolutely fine. We've been taught for so long to trim really close that it is difficult to remember, and quite honestly that's one of the reasons that I'm restitching this block from what I just showed you, the completed block, because I didn't do that previously. So that's it for that fabric. Move that to make it easier to trim. Now if you don't have the ability to move the hoop and make it easier to trim, just pull your hoop out, but make sure you're keeping it on a flat surface. That is one of the biggest things that we need to do, and mistakes that people make when they do machine embroidery. So that's our pie sections. Next up, we have the two sections in the middle, which we're going to do in our dark and medium teal fabrics. Now, first thing I want to do is see if I can utilise a scrap of fabric for this. And to do that, because I always want to use up a scrap where possible, it's just a much more efficient way of doing anything. And the answer is not quite. Ah, this one does though. Okay. So wherever possible, I like to use my scraps. It's just making sure that I'm getting the most out of every project that I do. Now you can use whatever colours you want, and you don't have to create this quilt all in one colour either. It would be a great way of using up scraps because it is based on Moroccan tiles. It is perfect for using as a scrappy quilt. This is the tricky bit. Am I going to get this one? And yes, I am going to get that out of there. Perfecto. And these are actually scraps that I've just come across from stitching other blocks of this quilt already. Now it's always do as I say, not as I do. Do not start cutting until your machine has stopped, of course. I am one of the most impatient people I know, and I know that I am always breaking that rule, let's say. And because of that, I've ruined many needles and scissors. This is our darker teal colour. Now because we're not on an edge, we're really trimming quite closely here, so you can be a lot more aggressive and stingy with how you lay your fabrics down. You can see why I love the option of moving that hoop over though, because it does just save so much time rather than taking the hoop on and off. trimming up quite closely. Now I'm using batiks, which really don't have a good and a bad side of the fabric. Obviously, if your fabric does, you will need to take a little more care. And I'm being deliberately stingy there to stop myself from having to trim that awkward seam again. Okay, so now all of our fabrics are laid down and we can start thinking about doing the stitching. So the stitching is going to be in 4 different colours, obviously to match our fabrics. And we're going to use a decorative stitch around the pie segments, and we're going to use a satin stitch around the pinwheels. Okay, so first things first, remove the wash away thread and we place in the thread that we're going to use, which for us first of all is going to be the medium teal. And we're going to stitch out our first satin. And the next colour is going to be for the darker teal. we are on to pie segments. And my pie segments are done first with beautiful deep rosy sort of a colour. Excuse the hand. And then for the final of the stitching, in the colours of course, not final altogether, I'm going to use this lovely wine colour. Okay, so that is all of our stitching, and now we're ready to get on to the quilting. So to start the quilting, you are going to take your wadding, lay it over the back of your design and stitch the third last colourway, which is going to hold that down. We are then going to trim that away incredibly close before we take our backing fabric and we lay the backing fabric over that design. You can get really creative by using different scraps of fabric in your backings, and it will give the back of your quilt just as colourful a look as the front of the quilt. At the same time, we want to come along and change from my embroidery thread back over to wash away thread, because the next stitching line is going to stitch the backing fabrics to the quilt project. Now, if you need to hold that down, feel free to use tape. Once I'm sure it's smooth, I'm pretty happy with that. And I put my hoop back on. And now we come around. Oops. Helps if you actually thread the needle, Julie. That's probably better. And we are going to baste with the basting tape, and don't worry about the fact that it's a millimetre or two outside of that original stitching line. That is because all of the stitching that we've done has made it sucking. And then I can get rid of the wash away thread. We don't need that for this project anymore. And instead I'm going to change over to a white thread or the same colour thread as my background. And this is going to do the quilting on through all of those layers. Through. And it's going to start by doing a bubble quilt design, and that is the design that you also have as the single block quilting design as well. And then it's going to finish off by doing an echo quilting in these areas here. And that is our block completed. You can see how beautiful that stitching looks. And what I also love is then when you look at the back of the quilt, it looks like a traditionally completed quilt as well. Okay, so that is the first block in the Rock the Casbah collection. I hope you have enjoyed that. I hope you will join us next month for the next blocks. And if you have any questions, please let us know at sales@JulieHallDesigns. Until next time, have a stitching day. Bye.